Counsel for Michael Chong.
Prime Minister, my client was here in September and gave evidence to the Commissioner. And one of the concerns that he expressed is that this country has become, in his words, a playground for foreign interference by states like PRC and India. Mr. Mendicino was here last week and disputed that phrase, playground of foreign interference. Given the revelations by the RCMP and by you, sir, on Monday, isn't Mr. Chong's assessment closer to the mark than Mr. Mendicino's?
No, I think it reinforces how wrong Mr. Chong is, because what this week has been all about is demonstrating the capacity and the reality that Canada has been both detecting foreign interference and acting on it. I would suggest that knowing about this and revealing it to the public and creating diplomatic malaise, to put it lightly, is an example of us pushing back strongly against attempts at interference in this country.
Not just attempts, sir, successful interference.
Yes.
You confirmed this morning that your government's assessment of the PRC's targeting of Michael Chong and his relations in Hong Kong is not foreign interference, but is instead lawful diplomatic activity. Sir, there were, in 2021, 4 intelligence products. We've only seen one of them, but there were 4 concerning PRC activities directed at my client, all coming from CSIS. The one that we've been able to see in some unredacted form is the famous IMU from the 31st of May, which I expect you've seen before. It says explicitly that CSIS regards there as being multiple threat actors, including the Ministry of State Security. Are you aware of that, sir? I can show you the document if it helps, but you may be familiar with it already.
I am Commissioner, sorry, just before the Prime Minister answered, my friend said you confirmed this morning that the PRC's targeting of Chong was not foreign interference. My recollection is the Prime Minister testified that Zhao Wei's targeting of Chong was not foreign interference. So I believe that was the evidence the Prime Minister gave, but I stand to be corrected by my friend.
Yes. I was talking about Zhao Wei.
Yeah, it's much of a muchness to me, sir. So my point is this. The Ministry of State Security, you're familiar with that agency?
Yes.
Is there any such agency in this country?
I think drawing parallels between Canadian structures and the PRC structures is extremely difficult at best.
Yes, particularly in the case of the MSS, because it's a foreign intelligence agency and we don't have one of those, right?
We have an intelligence agency that focuses on collection internationally, which is CSIS.
Right, right. But we don't send spies abroad and we don't send secret police abroad. Isn't that right, sir?
I'm not going to speak to CSIS operations, but I can tell you there are CSIS employees all around the world.
Sir, my point is this. The MSS is PRC's...
I'm missing something about
well, let me get
CSIS
to it.
Does.
MSS is PRC's equivalent of Russia's FSB or the Soviet Union's old KGB, or indeed India's RAW, the research and analysis.
Or the U.S.'s CIA.
Right. We don't have anything like that. My point, sir, is that if a diplomat, a so-called diplomat, Wei Zhou, in this country is sending information about a Canadian MP, 2 Canadian MPs as it turns out, back to MSS, not back to the foreign departments, not back to foreign affairs, but to China's spy agency, that, sir, is not lawful diplomacy. Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, I'll say 2 things about that. First of all, I'm not entirely certain that you understand what CSIS is, if not Canadians' agency for collecting intel overseas. And secondly, in terms of the analysis of what Zhao Wei or others we're doing. I am obviously not an expert in the hierarchies within the People's Republic of China's various agencies, but what I can say is I defer to CSIS's conclusions on these because they are the intelligence agency that provides me information, provides us information on foreign activities, particularly bad actors. CSIS's conclusion in this case that we've seen before this commission is that the actions that Zhao Wei engaged in regards to your client did not constitute foreign interference. Now, I am reporting that. I am not the person who made the analysis and determination that it was on one side of the line or others. I have confidence in our agencies that do make that determination, however.
Sir, Zhao Wei was not a lawful diplomat. He was a foreign intelligence agent. He was a Chinese spy. Do you accept that?
I accept when I will state that he was ejected from Canada because he was no longer able to even carry the role of diplomat, which was his overt role. But I also explained that there were situations in which CSIS has concluded that he engaged in foreign interference activities, albeit not towards your client, Michael Chong.
So I put it to you that Zhao Wei was outed as a foreign spy, not by your government, but by the Globe and Mail.
There is no question that the criminal who leaked the information to the media had a role to play in our decision to expel Michael Chong. But as I said, expel Zhao Wei. But there were three factors that went into that decision to declare him persona non grata. One was the escalating tensions between Canada and China, where they, despite repeated attempts, refused to decrease or stop their interference activities. Two was the fact that Zhao Wei was indeed, and this perhaps goes to your contention, was engaged in foreign interference activities, albeit not towards Michael Chong. And three was the fact that his name was plastered across the newspapers made it impossible for him to continue to be a diplomat in Canada.
NSICOP reports that CSIS identified Zhao Wei as a candidate for expulsion in 2019, several years before the Globe and Mail story. But your government let him stay here. Nothing was done about him, and you, on your own evidence, had never even heard of him until you read about him in the Globe that morning. I put it to you, sir, that as head of government, you ought to have known who Zhao Wei was and what was going on. Should someone not have informed you about his activities?
As I've said a number of times, in my role as Prime Minister, I need to know the behavior of China. I need to know the behavior of India. I need to know the behavior of Russia in regards to Canada, in regards to Canadians, in regards to Canadian interests. I do not need to know the operational details to be able to establish and empower the agencies to actually go after that. Now, I need to know the type of things they are doing, but knowing the actual name of the individual, there are such a large number of names that I trust and count on my intelligence agencies to do the follow-ups on the dozens of diplomats that they must keep a close eye on across the country at all given times. And me sitting with a list of names of potential problematic people does nothing to help keep Canadians safe in the role that I have.
But, sir, it goes well beyond particular names, because what you weren't told was that there was a debate raging in your government between CSIS on the one hand and Global Affairs on the other. CSIS assessed that these activities, we see it in the 2021 IMU, were threats to the security of Canada. CSIS conducted a TRM of Michael Chong on the 2nd of May for that same reason. Meanwhile, Mr. Morrison...
Excuse me, it was not a TRM.
It was a defensive briefing, actually. I misspoke this morning, so you caught me on that. It was a defensive briefing to Michael Chong, not a threat reduction measure, which is apparently an important distinction. But
Well, I'll leave that for now. I thought Mr. Chong's evidence was that he was informed by CSIS was a TRM. In any event,
That was after the leaks.
that's what I'm talking
That was,
about.
okay, that was,
Yes.
I believe that was a TRM. It was the
On
earlier
the
ones
2nd
that
of
were
May,
defensive.
2023, that was a TRM.
2023, yes.
Precisely. So you've got the security service on the one side assessing that these are foreign threats, this is foreign interference. You've got Mr. Morrison and Jody Thomas, Global Affairs, saying, no, you've misunderstood, this is consistent with the Vienna Convention. What you ought to have known, but were never told, sir, was that there was this debate going on and that it was causing disagreements between agencies about how to properly analyze and characterize particular instances. Michael Chong happens to be one. There may very well have been others. Someone ought to have told you that. And so I want to push back on this notion that we've heard from other witnesses. And
Actually, let me push back on that right there. I testified earlier today that I am fully aware and indeed regularly apprised of tension of constructive creative tension, of disagreements of perspective between diplomats and spies, or between our Global Affairs Canada and
But sir, no one
CSIS
told you before May 2023 that there was a dispute in your government about whether Zhao Wei was acting lawfully or
You're right,
illegally.
not about this particular
That's my
person,
point.
but about a range of diplomats from many different countries who are engaged in questionable activities that we have to make determinations around which ones and when we kick out, knowing full well that as soon as we PNG anyone, we lose diplomats on the other side who are not engaged in subterfuge. So there are many factors that go into when one takes a PNG decision. If we were to kick out every single diplomat who raised concerns, we wouldn't have any diplomats and therefore no representation in any of our adversarial countries. And part of diplomacy is making sure that we do have people there, and the price of that is having people here. Now, what our intelligence agencies are constantly doing, as you're pointing out, is keeping an eye, metaphorically or actually, on many of these people, while engaging in an ongoing dialogue, sometimes a debate, with Global Affairs Canada to ensure that we're getting that balance right of protecting Canadians and allowing the work that Canadians are doing overseas in these countries to continue to further protect Canadians.
Sir, you've characterized this debate as a good thing in your words this morning. Other witnesses have come and called it a healthy debate. I want to suggest to you that it wasn't a healthy debate. Having a debate about what foreign interference means and where the line is between that and lawful diplomacy is fine to a point. But at a certain point where one of your agencies is saying one thing and the other one is saying the other, someone has to come to you as the head of government and say, we have this dispute, it's causing us trouble in operationalizing particular instances, my client's instance being one, but no doubt there were others. Someone should have come to you, the NSIA should have come to you and said, Prime Minister, we've got this difference of opinion, we want you to know both sides, and we need your guidance. But no one ever did that, and so you were left in the dark.
But that is exactly why the authority for PNGing someone rests in the Minister of Foreign Affairs' office, and she was very much closer to this debate because it is her responsibility. And when the decision was elevated to, okay, we should possibly and probably PNG this individual, then I was brought in as part of the discussion around that, recognizing that it was her authority to do.
Sir, when the story came out in the Globe and Mail, Mr. Morrison explained to us that Global Affairs went back, looked at its records, found that, in fact, CSIS had been raising alarms about Wei Zhao's activities years before, but they had never, in Mr. Morrison's words, moved beyond the working level, meaning they somehow had not come to the attention of leaders within Global Affairs. So, again, I say to you that this is a failing of this government to take serious situations and serious debates about what's foreign interference and what isn't, and actually resolve them. It's all well and good to debate them, but at a certain point, a judgment has to be made, and someone has to give governance and guidance about how things should proceed. And that wasn't done until we read about it in the Globe and Mail
On the contrary.
2nd of May.
Choosing to not act is a judgment. The fact that it wasn't determined in those previous moments that the threshold for PNG had been met was an active decision. Yes, you can act by PNGing someone, but you can also act by saying, no, we're going to keep this individual under surveillance. We're going to keep keep them within what we know. I can't speak to whether or not there is active surveillance on any individual or not, but continue to be aware of this individual and what they are doing, because it has purpose. Finding out when that right line is and when that moment is not something to be taken lightly, and it is something that rests on the collected and collective expertise of people who've been working in the security and intelligence domain for years to develop the expertise on when that timing is right.
So it wasn't a matter of you choosing not to act when it came to Weizhou. You didn't know you had a choice before you at all.
But the act is not
never
mine.
told you.
The act is not mine. I do not determine when someone should be
Well, the same goes for Madame Joly.
Maybe
She
you can
didn't
ask
choose
Madame
to-
Joly about
Sorry,
that.
Just a moment. I think just wait for him to answer. And same thing on your side, just
course.
wait for the question to.
We go back to debating days at McGill, so there's a little bit of back and forth there.
My point, sir, was that there's no evidence that this was put before Madame Joly or whoever the foreign minister was at the time either. It all came to a head because of the leak. And what I'm suggesting, you have rightly said, that the leak is criminal. Absolutely right. Should not have happened. But this debate, which I say is not healthy, but was festering in your government, boiled over with someone taking the law into their own hands, what they ought never to have done, and revealing all this to the world. And only then did you react. There was nothing proactive. That's my concern, sir.
Well, the issue with the criminal who leaked this information is they got it wrong in what they leaked. And regardless of what's in the newspapers or not, it is incumbent upon a serious, responsible government not to react to partisan attacks or erroneous but salacious headlines, but to react on the substance of things. And that's exactly what we did when we, as a government collectively, in the person of the foreign minister, made the determination that it was time to PNG Zhao Wei.
So you seem to be suggesting that Michael Chong overreacted in worrying about his relations in Hong Kong.
No, not at all.
Well, that is what you're suggesting.
No, I am suggesting that confronted with or faced with a leak that is itself erroneous, that suggests that China has threatened with violence his family, as the inference of the leak and the subsequent headlines were, Mr. Chong had every right to be concerned and even outraged, as did everyone, as were we, by the idea that his family had been threatened with direct physical violence, which is what the leak and the leaker suggested. We now know that that is wrong, and that is why it is really important that governments act based on actual analysis and actual intelligence and evaluation of that intelligence, and not just what appears, as you say, in the Globe and Mail.
Well, sir, I told Mr. Clow this yesterday, and I'll say it to you. Mr. Chong does not share your seeming confidence that his relatives in Hong Kong will never be coerced or threatened or even physically harmed by that state. It is not a rule of law democracy. It is not a state that has a track record of respecting people's freedom of conscience, freedom of political thought. And so these concerns that he has, whether they are based in intelligence that was misinterpreted in the Globe and Mail or not, are legitimate and fair. And you seem to be wanting to downplay them, and I want to push back on that.
I am not downplaying them in the least. What I am saying is, as a responsible government, as a government that is making decisions about how best to protect Canadians, including and especially parliamentarians, we need to rely on the best intelligence and evidence and analysis and recommendations of our security agencies. And that is what we have leaned on in terms of concluding what threats were there on Mr. Chong and what positions and postures we should take because of it. We are a country that leans on its intelligence agencies, not on criminals leaking things to newspapers.
One final point, sir. The evidence repeatedly has been that other parts of the government have not relied on CSIS's warnings. In fact, the Minister of Public Safety doesn't even seem to have received them or certainly didn't read them. The same is true of the NSIA. The same seems to be true of the Clerk of the Privy Council. So it's all well and good for you to say we're a country that respects our security agencies. The evidence, sir, has been that the security agency has been sidelined, and the concerns it's been trying to raise have been neglected and sometimes not even read.
I think much of what we have demonstrated through this commission as a government is that we have taken seriously from the very first day threats to national security through creating things that Mr. Chong was opposed to, like the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. But I would suggest if Mr. Chong wanted to be part of an organization that was taking security seriously, he implore his leader, Pierre Poilievre, to get a security briefing so he can hear directly from CSIS on the challenges threatening his institution, the Conservative Party of Canada.
I'll take that advice back to him. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Commissioner.